think we've got it figured out.
Okay.
I hope so. There we go. Okay, so apparently it says that we're live now. Oh boy. Yeah, every single
Uh,
time I think I figured out this whole streaming thing, they go and change things on me. And of
oh
course,
god, yeah.
they don't tell me until we're actually in the stream. It's like, oh, hey. So,
Oh, yeah, there we go. No, I can. It looks like it's appearing now.
oh, wonderful. Okay. Yeah, we are
Uh-huh.
live. Oh, except my phone is because I need to see the chat, and so it's just like, oh, let's advertise Rice Krispies because I like money and I want to put ads in front of all my stuff.
Great. Yeah, yeah. I mean, why not?
Why not, right? Yeah. So thanks everybody for coming on. We are going to talk about essentially Opeth for this whole little bit. As I do with all these, I want to thank my special guest for coming on today, Grace. Um, and there will be just a slight delay between what you hear and what you see. It's the fun times of using Zoom but not being able to directly capture the Zoom's audio. I will one day figure that out, just not that day. But thank you for coming on and joining me today, Grace.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It's good to be here. I like chatting about music, so it's pretty on my street.
Yeah. And I'll also mention this at the end of the stream, but you recently put out an EP. So,
I did. Yep. Oh, I'm
yes.
almost prepared, but my headphones aren't long enough. There you go. Look, it's the yeah. I put out an EP. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah.
So I'm hoping once I finally get my mind into it and do another quarter notes, I'll be featuring that for sure. And if you want to find out what it sounds like, I've left the link for your Bandcamp in the description of this video, so people can go and check that out. So,
It's exciting.
yeah, so go and
Yeah.
check that out. So, yeah, we're here to talk about Opeth, and as I like to do with all of these, I want to know kind of your journey into Opeth and how you originally got into Opeth.
So the year was maybe 2015, 2016, and I kind of had a bit of a interesting journey through music. When I was a kid, I was listening to a lot of Genesis and a lot of Yes,
Mm-hmm.
just because that was what my dad listened to, and I would borrow his iPod and go and listen to it on walks and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of deviated from that a little bit, and I went into electronic music, and then I kind of went back and went into like Metallica and Rammstein and started going to like thrashy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then came back to prog, and I was like, oh, this is some cool stuff. I might try and find some more. And that's when I started looking at like the prog rock and prog metal subreddits on Reddit and started listening to music there, and that's where I found like Haken and some other bands.
Mm-hmm.
And I came across I think there was like a Hall of Fame or something with Opeth, and people saying like, listen to Blackwater Park, like that's the album. You've got to listen to this album. I was like, okay, well, I quite like filling in the gaps of musical history.
Mm-hmm.
So listening to important albums, so I checked that one out. And that was kind of my gateway from only liking clean vocals into harsh vocals because of the blend of, the nice and the evil.
Yeah.
And then you've also got the blend of electric and acoustic, because there's tons of really beautiful acoustic moments on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of like not only was a gateway into Opeth, but was a gateway into heavier music in general.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, when are the harsh vocals going to come in? Like, when are they going to start screaming at me?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting journey, and that's kind of why that album's really important to me. And also Opeth as a band's really important to me, because they kind of pulled me into the more sinister areas of sort of prog rock and prog metal.
Right.
And yeah, that's where I came across them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very, very similar in that, much like you growing up, it was very into like Genesis, Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Pink Floyd, and so I was just loving all of that. And at the same time, I was also into a lot of the more heavier kind of new metal stuff. So like growing up in Canada, it was like Limp Bizkit. It was like a little bit later on, like My Chemical Romance and all that. So I always kind of had that heavier tinge to it. Like one of my favorite tapes growing up was the Appetite for Destruction from Guns N' Roses that my dad had in the car. Except I didn't know what it was called. I would always just call it Pirates because of all the skulls on there, and I thought it was Pirates. So I would always say, I want to hear Pirates. But yeah, so after I had just devoured all of my dad's collection of all that deep prog, I started looking for myself. And instead of the Reddits, I'd go to like the Prog Archive, because that's essentially where I would live. And I kept seeing things for Opeth and more of like the tech extreme stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm not a big fan of the growls. I'm not a big fan of screaming and yelling and all that. So it wasn't until, I want to say it was 2008, when my local HMV had Blackwater Park as a record. And at that point, like record stores, like new music, like HMV, Sunrise, we also had like Sam the Record Man, they wouldn't necessarily carry records. It would only be like CDs. And when I was very young, it would be like tapes. So seeing an actual record for sale, and I was a huge record fan, like that was my choice of consuming music. I was like, ooh, a new record. I've heard about Opeth, so I'll give it a try. I'll give it a spin. So I picked it up, and this was when you could also get the CD included in the record, and together it was like $15. I'm like, I can't say no to that. So I know, right? So I put it on the turntable, and it started off very acoustically, but then immediately started screaming and yelling at me, and I'm like, oh boy, I don't know oh boy. But like the more I would listen to it, the more I fell in love with those more like heavenly passages like Burden and Hassian Pill, and just like love that, which allowed me to digest some more of those harsher moments, to the point where I started loving those harsher moments. And I'm like, much like you, when are they going to start screaming their balls off? Like, when are they going to start really giving me the good stuff? So that was, and then from there, I think I got the Roundhouse tapes for Christmas that year, and fell in love with all the music that I was hearing on that, and then just dove headfirst into their catalog. So yeah, that was my journey into Opeth. So yeah, I think we could start. I think we can start rating these guys and putting them through the tiers, and kind of talking about them. This is going to be like more of a discussion, and trying to find where we both believe that they'll be. This is more of like a democracy rather than a dictatorship, even though, this is my stream and I can say what I want. But yeah, it's going to be like a collaboration. And if either of us have like a very passionate stance on something, I think that'll take precedent. So yeah, and for anybody that's watching, I've got the chat open, so let me know where you think each of these will be. I will not be putting those under consideration, but it will be fun to kind of see where everybody thinks they are. The only opinion right now that matters is mine and Grace's. Everybody else's, it's fine. Yes, if you want your opinion to matter, try to find your way onto the stream. Okay, we can start with their first album, the one that kicked it all off, of Orchid.
Yeah.
I'll let you take the starting with this one, because I think this is one that I wasn't all that well aware of. I picked up the Candlelight Years box set that has the first 3 albums in it. And like this one's not one that I listened to all that much, but I was able to find it on vinyl when I was living in London, Ontario. So I spun it for a while there. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are about this album.
So this was kind of a new one to me. Like up until a month ago or so, I was still missing 3 Opeth albums. So 10 of them I'd listened to death. And I'm a very slow, gradual, when I get into a band, I'm not like, I'm going to listen to every album at once, because I feel like they will start to blur together. Yeah. So I've kind of like slowly picked stuff up. And I thought, right, I'll get the last 3. And Orchid was one of them. So I'm not hugely familiar with it, but I do have a couple of opinions. And I find it really interesting how, for me at least, I feel like the production was really good on that album, and then it took a dip for the next 2 albums.
I kind of agree.
Morningrise was a little bit rougher, And then like My Arms Go Hearse, I just remember I can't remember which track it is, but it starts with just a piano line, and it's just really, it just doesn't sound as crispy and as clean. Maybe that's just like a stylistic thing, but it just stood out to me a bit more like that straight away.
Yeah.
And the other track that stood out to me was Silhouette, because that's an all like acoustic piano track, and it's very wonky and very like all over the place, and it's out of time. And you know, if you're talking to a classical pianist, they'd say like, this is a beginner like playing the piano for the first time. Like there's just wrong notes, and like it just sounds really weird, but I kind of like that. It's very raw,
yeah,
and it's very human.
Yeah, and it fits.
And you forget it's a debut album as well. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
You can't hold them to too high of a standard right off the get-go.
Yeah, yeah, and talking about that piano piece, it still fits the hard edge feeling, even though it is so more mellow. Like it still captures the musical styles, just in a very different expression. So, yeah, I kind of like how they did that, and I'm agreeing with you pretty much all across the board. Like I really do enjoy the production work on this. It's so much more clear and a lot more like tangible. Where I find Morningrise and My Arms Your Hearst is a little bit more raw, and maybe that's the point. We can get into that a little bit more when we talk about those. But unlike the other two albums, I find that there's there's a few tracks on here that get me excited and that I come back to. I think one of the main ones, is it Win that's on here, and Under the Weeping Moon. Under the Weeping Moon is one that I really like, mainly because it's Win isn't on here. That's the next album, or maybe the one afterwards. Anyway, yeah, Under the Weeping Moon I really enjoy. And even a little bit of The Twilight Is My Robe, but like other than that, there's not a whole lot on here that like I love certain parts of, like the first track. I like certain parts. Forest of October, I kind of like, especially when I'm listening to it in the fall. So there are like moments on these tracks that I really like, but as the track overall, I'm not a big fan in comparison to what they're going to be doing later on. So
yeah, no,
yeah.
I mean, they definitely got better.
Yeah, so for me, like I wouldn't put this all the way down to a like a D, but I feel like a C is kind of more where I would put this.
For me, that's where it sits.
Yeah,
and I think it might grow me the more I listen to it. But at the moment, I think it's saying about a C.
Yeah, it's one that I have to be in the right mood for, and I think we were talking about this when I first reached out, where there are certain albums that are very fall-oriented, very autumn essenced, and I think this one in particular is very much like that. So yeah, we can move on unless you have anything else to say to to Morningrise.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very interesting follow-up. Because I do enjoy this album a little bit more, even though the production side of it is a little off. I still, even though I love the live renditions of a lot of these tracks, I still love The Night and The Silent Water, even though I prefer the live version of this. And Advent is okay, like the first track. And it's so interesting because, being a huge progger that I am, you would think that Black Rose Immortal I would absolutely love, being that I think it's their only 20-minute track.
Yeah, it's very long.
Yeah, but it really feels the length, and it's one of those tracks where I'm like, why is it 20 minutes? There's no real reason for it to be 20 minutes. Like, it just kind of wanders all over the place. It's a very interesting track. But of course, To Bid You Farewell is all right, but it's just strange. Like, I like the longer stretches of music that's on here, and it's a good follow-up. But yeah, I'm not quite sure how I feel about this overall.
Yeah, I don't love it or hate it. It's obviously very dark, I feel like this is maybe one of their darkest records. Yeah, the production is very raw, but you can kind of like, you can hear all of the bits of their sound sort of gently developing. You know, you've got the bits of acoustic blending with electric guitar. It's kind of a bit more prominent. You can kind of hear the song structures. And I think, yeah, it is just kind of a young band, new execution kind of thing. You know, they're not experienced guitar players or engineers or whatever at this point. You know, they're still hugely early in the career. But again, what I find interesting is that Morningrise was produced by the same person as Orchid, and then it switched from My Arms Your Hearse. So it's a guy called Dan Sueno, and it's, you kind of think maybe there would be some consistency between those two albums, or more consistency, but they feel quite different to me.
They do,
like, Morningrise is definitely playing a lot more on the sort of black metal side of things. That's good though.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, this one is definitely more, and that was something that I was even struggling with as I started to listen to it, because of being exposed to The Night in the Silent Water on the Roundhouse tapes, as well as having Black Rose Immortal. I thought I was going to love this album, but I was a little bit disappointed, but I think the more that I listened to it and knowing what I have to find on this album, again, I have to be in the right mood. Like, today is a perfect day to listen to this album because it's dreary, it's drizzly, it's rainy, it's windy. But like, if I were listening to this on a sunny, bright afternoon, I don't know if I would quite enjoy it to the same amount.
No, that's fair. It's got to be a winter's day. It's got to be quite cold.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of rating, I think that this is pretty much on par because I feel like there are certain points where they improve, but there are also certain things that I feel like they should have improved instead. So yeah, for me, this is a C. It's still one that I think is a good album, but not a great Opeth album in that sense.
Yeah, and again, it's like, it's one of those things you're like comparing good against great.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. And this was something that we were talking about before, where it's like we're comparing it as the standard of Opeth albums rather than just albums overall, right? So, we really are comparing really good to great. And speaking of that, we can move on to My Arms Your Hearse. The third album. And in some respects, this was the album that really broke them out. Yeah,
it's a little bit more refined. Again, Dan's on this now. I think Michael took over the production a little bit more. So it's a bit more kind of in-house. And it's kind of the point where I think he's gone, okay, this is my project now. Because, you know, when the band started, I think he joined someone else's band, and then everyone else left and he rebranded it. So it's kind of like his own thing anyway.
Yeah. And you can actually...
that's what's going on in My Arms.
Yeah, and you can hear that shift too, because it kind of... Even though it still has a little bit of that longer stretches, very proggy aspect to the metal, it's a little bit more refined, it's a little bit more punchy. I feel like the songs are much more tighter, specifically on like some of the big tracks like Win and obviously of Demon of the Fall. But I also love how this album has a very clear opening and closing piece with prologue and epilogue. It does, and I mean, the cover art looks very similar to like a Black Sabbath record, like their first one.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't until I actually got the album on vinyl that I realized that there's like a somebody standing in the center of the album itself. It's not just like a divide within the trees, that there's like this little silhouette. There's like a silhouette with a face in there. And like when you see it on CD, it's really hard to kind of see, but it wasn't until it was like blowing up in my face, I'm like, wait, there's a person standing there. So it kind of has that like essence to it.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't wear glasses, but I feel like I need them trying to find this.
Yeah, so it's like there's that blue divide right down the middle, and then that small little bit of blue, that's the face. And then the figure silhouette is in the background there.
Yeah, okay, then I would say that.
Yeah, and again, it wasn't until I had it blown up on a record cover that I'm like, oh, that's what's going on this. And I feel like I feel like that essence is found musically, where upon the first number of listens, you don't realize a lot of the background sounds until you start hearing them and start looking for them. So this album really did elevate the music, and would also kind of pave the way for at least their next 3 or 4 albums of like what they're all about.
Yeah, I think this. Yeah, you're right. There's kind of a theme that is developed now, I think, and it is. Yeah, it does flow through the next few albums.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm really interested. How do you feel about this album?
I like it. I think it's not like the best of this kind of era, because I feel like the first 2 albums are almost their own thing, and then you've kind of got like My Arms to sort of Deliverance as its own kind of like little enclave of music. I don't know, maybe I'd pop this in B tier. Maybe I'd jump it slightly higher.
Yeah,
I know
it's
just a bit more polished, a bit more.
it's more of its own thing. Yeah, like I agree. I know a lot of people love this album, and I know a lot of people this is their favorite album from them. It's not necessarily my favorite of theirs, but it is one that I look upon very, very fondly. And I think out of this like Candlelights era, I think this is the best album from those first 3, but it is kind of showing where the band would go. And I do feel like all the albums that kind of come after it for a while is even better, like taking the ideas that they've put. So I have no problem putting this in like a B, just to say like there's even better to come after this. We're putting down a really good foundation of what Opeth means. So
Yeah. Good.
Great. So far, we're in agreement for all these. So we can move right along to Still Life. And, Still Life is one of those albums that I think a lot of people either agree is like their favorite, one that they look upon extremely fondly. This was my second album of theirs. And I know... Yeah, so after I got the Roundhouse tapes and I saw that Face of Melinda was on there, yeah, I've got my copy hidden there in my trunk of CDs. And this is actually one of the few albums that I have twice on record, because the first edition that I have is a picture disc and it sounds like utter garbage.
Yeah, I know what I'm saying. Oh.
Yeah, and then this past week I did a road trip to Sudbury, and the record store that I frequent there had a new pressing that was just a black one. And I'm like, I have to pick this up, even though I technically already have it, and it sounds incredible. So, yeah, I have a very fondness about this album, even though, like, it's weird. Like, it's not my favorite of theirs, but I do look upon it very, very fondly because of that, because it was my... like the next big endeavor in the harsher vocals, the harder form of metal. I will admit, The More is one of my favorite tracks from them. But I find...
It's good. I love this slow build and just the gradual... like...
Oh, yeah. It's such a great build, and I love... it really takes the music that My Arms Are Hearse put down and elevated it to the next level. But I find there's a lot of tracks on here that I'm not the biggest fan of. Like Serenity Painted Death, I can kind of take or leave. I think it's a little corny at times. Especially, like... And it's a shame, because it's one of the tracks that end it. So it's an odd one for me in that, like, it's got some of my favorite tracks, like The More and Face of Melinda. But with Serenity Painted Death and... like Godhead's Lament, I'm not as big of a fan of those tracks, so it's a little bit of a mixed grab bag for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I know I really like Face Melinda, because again, that's like... So when I saw Opeth live in 17, 16 or something on the Sorceress tour, they played a bunch of tracks from Sorceress, but they also did like one track from like a bunch of earlier albums, and Face Melinda was the one that they did from this album. And I was like, whoa, this is so different from some of their other stuff. Like, it's very kind of peaceful, and it's almost like damnation in a song. It's very like... I don't know, it's almost like it's like an acoustic like pop ballad kind of thing. Like, it's so its own little thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even like the other track, what was it? Benighted is very poppy. It's like a very ballady acoustic track. But it's interesting because that was the only time I got to see Opeth as well, was on their Sorceress tour. Um, and yeah, hearing Face of Melinda once again, I was just like, oh, this is like I'm glad that they're reaching back and playing some of these softer tracks on it. So yeah, whereabouts would you put Still Life then? Because this is kind of like what I'm really interested to hear.
I think I'd maybe pop it into A, because I don't like I don't think there's a track on there I don't like.
Okay, yeah.
The only reason why I wouldn't put it at the top is because, like, you got to leave some wiggle room, right? You know?
That's true. Yeah, we gotta.
There's other albums I prefer, but
yeah.
I do really enjoy it, and it is like, if that was the one Opeth album I heard, I'd be like, wow, this band's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would
There's so much.
Yeah, I agree to that. I have no problem putting this into the A category. Like those tracks that I do love on this album, I really, really love, and I will come back to it. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting it into B because of those good tracks. I think it wouldn't quite work for me. But I also agree that I want to leave the sanctity of the S tier for those like beyond words amazing albums. And I think we can transition into the next album that they put out when Steven Wilson came on board.
Yes.
With Blackwater Park. Speaking of otherworldly, practically touching the divine.
I love that. My copy says, warning, moderate impact, coarse language, and or themes. Supervision.
I wonder if even... Now I have to check. So while I'm checking to see my copy, tell me your... Because I know you said that this was one of your introductions. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of a desert island disc. Like, there's just not... I just love every moment on this album. I've listened to it, like, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. It's just, if I want to listen to, like, top-tier fantastic music, like, this just hits every kind of spot. All of the different, like, musical bones in my body are just like, yes, this is what I've been craving.
Yes.
And I've got the live DVD as well, where they play the whole thing in the Albert Hall.
Oh,
and,
yeah. I've got that one. I've got like the 5 discs where it also comes with like the CDs on it.
Oh yeah.
So
and it's just it's so good. Like the Leper Affinity, you've got that like slow build and then just that really aggressive riff. And again, that was like one of the reasons I went to picking up guitar, was to start learning like how do they play these songs. And like I learned to play them very badly when I was like 17 on an acoustic guitar, because that was all I had.
Yeah.
And it's just like, again, you've got kind of similar to Still Life, and maybe it's almost a cliche at this point. You look throughout their discography, there's so many albums with intro tracks now, just like little bits of intro.
Yeah.
But I just love how like the Leper Affinity just slaps you in the face as soon as it hits it.
Yeah, it almost comes out of nowhere. I just had a look, and mine doesn't really have any of those warnings on it. Maybe it's a Canadian thing. I remember, because everybody had said how amazing this album was. I remember the first time I sat down and listened to it, I was honestly a little disappointed. And I know that's I should have waited until you'd taken a full sip there. But because everybody's like, this is like top tier, this is like the best of the best, you're gonna love this, and I had to listen to it. I'm like, yeah, it's good, but like it's not as good as like Watershed or and I know if I had said that, people would have been like, heretic, get out, give me your prog card immediately. But I think part of it was just, it was so dense and it was so complex that my brain couldn't take it all in at once. Whereas some of those other albums like Watershed and Still Life, it allowed me to get into the tracks all at once and not have to worry too much about the complex noodling of the guitars and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really grow to appreciate this album until like 3 or 4 years after getting into it. And it wasn't until the Royal Albert Hall DVD that I was just like, oh, okay, now I'm getting it. Now I'm getting into it. I'm loving all the juice that's in here. And yeah, like those 3 tracks of the Leper Affinity, Bleak might be my favorite track off of this album.
Yeah.
I love that punch followed by a noodle, followed by another punch, followed by a noodle. Um, yeah, this is one that I look upon extremely fondly now, but it took me a long time to really get into it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And I think when you compare it to the kind of next couple of albums, because I kind of sit Blackwater Park with Deliverance and Ghost Reveries in terms of like a lot of the style of how they approach the composition, and I think it's probably the best one out of those for me because it's not repetitive.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of callbacks, and the ending feels like an ending without it like not quite ending.
Yeah.
It's just very balanced. Songs like Harvest, I think it's just beautiful. When I heard that, the contrast between that and then Michael screaming at you and like Three Pretty Fools and just
Yeah.
I don't know. There's not many albums that I will put on and just have to like sit down and not do anything else. A lot of the time when I'm listening to music, I'm putting it on in the background when I'm working or I'm like going for a walk or whatever. But this album, like, I can quite happily sit there and not do anything else for an hour and just listen to it and just have a great time.
Yeah.
So it is top tier. Like this is the top for me.
Yeah. And I have been initiated. I would feel very remiss if I didn't put it in the S tier. I also love, like, you can hear Steven Wilson's thumbprint on this, outside of the like some of the vocals that he's added on some of these tracks. But you can hear his influence, and you can hear kind of where he's directed the music on that, and in the next 2 albums. Sometimes for the better, sometimes, well, it's mainly for the better. I can't think of an instance outside of some of the odder harmonies that he does, I believe, with Bleak, that it adds to the music, but it's also a little bit off-putting, and I'm like, I don't know if I would actually hit those notes. Like, it was a choice and it works, but I don't know. So yeah, top tier, and I love what was all brought to this album. Yeah, and then we come to the double hitters of Deliverance and Damnation, starting with Damnation or Deliverance. I believe
Deliverance
is
is
the
first,
first one. Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like, yeah, this was actually the second LP that I picked up from them. So I was able to get, and I actually pulled it out, my version of Still Life. This was the first like CD that I picked up after I picked up Watershed and after the Roundhouse tapes. But I saw Deliverance? Yeah, Deliverance and Damnation. Why did they do this? I saw this at an HMV for like $25, and I'm like, okay, I'm loving Opeth. Let's see. And I feel like with these next 2 albums of Deliverance and Damnation, they split the essence that was Opeth into 2 to really kind of investigate what it means. So this one is much more of the proggy metal. There are a lot of tracks on here that I love. I'm just going to bring up the set list. Yeah, like, I love the title track. A Fair Judgment, I think, is a great... like, I love the outro of that one. And Master's Apprentice. So, like, those 3 are just... mwah. But I also feel like there's not a good balance between the hard-hitting Opeth and more of those somber, heavenly kind of sounds. I feel like they really concentrated on those kind of moments. Yeah,
no, I agree with that. And there's definitely moments I like in this album, but this is, I don't know, I find some parts really repetitive.
I agree.
They really hold on to the same idea for a really long time, and they just drag it out. So, like,
Yep.
By the Pain I See in Others, that song almost, like, ruins the album for me. And that's, like, maybe a bit dramatic.
No,
but
that's fair,
the way it ends is just so lame. It's, like, the same riff for, like, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it's just, like, a really random ending, and then silence for 5 minutes. And, like, I don't know, it feels like they just, like, ran out of time. We're like, quick, let's do this.
Yeah, and it's I agree that it's my least favorite track, because, like, they've mastered so many great outros on this album with A Fair Judgment and with A Master's Apprentice. And I'm trying to remember which one is the one that just, like, breaks down entirely, and when they play it live, it gets slower and slower, and it gets bigger and bigger.
I think it's Deliverance. I really like that track as well.
Yeah.
I think I got to see them play that live.
Yeah.
On that tour.
Yeah.
It was, like, ridiculous.
Yeah, and
like,
so
that is a really good track.
So you know that they're able to master that brilliant ending of a track, and I feel like the final ending is just a weird kind of like, and then they hold it forever. They keep holding it, and I'm like, it says it's still going, but I hear little wisps every once in a while. What's going on? Like, it's such a strange. I agree. It's such a strange ending, and it's the weakest point on the album, which is a shame that it's the ending of the album.
Yeah. I think they could have maybe tied it up a bit, but you know, it is what it is, and I'm stuck because jumping ahead, I kind of look at Deliverance and Damnation as like almost the same thing. They're not quite, but you know, they were written at the same time, and they were kind of just split up differently. And I'm kind of like, well, I definitely prefer Damnation, but like, do I prefer it like an entire tier above? I mean, maybe that's a bit dramatic.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that same thing, because it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other, which is kind of one of the drawbacks to doing album by album, because I agree. Like, I enjoy, although I'll say this, there are moments on Deliverance that I love more than any one moment on Damnation, but I can sit down and listen to Damnation and enjoy from start to finish the overall experience more than the experience that I would have with Deliverance.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if I like either more than like a tier that I would put them in. So that's why I'm kind of wavering between the A and the B tier. Because I think
that's kind of where I'm at.
The biggest sin that these two albums have is that they're not a single album, and that they're actually two. But yeah, I don't know if I want to put it in an A tier or a B tier, because that's where I'm kind of wavering.
Maybe let's make a decision after we talk about Damnation.
That's a good idea.
We can
I'm gonna slide Deliverance over so that it's right between the A and the B, and we can talk about Damnation. Because I agree. I think once we start talking about Damnation, I think it'll become clear where they both belong. Because up to that point, I was struggling with the harsher moments on this. This one I also own in CD. I don't have it with me because it's at the family cottage, because this is how I got my dad and my stepmom into Opeth. And then I played the back-to-back set list DVD, where they start off with Damnation and then go for a break and then play Deliverance. And they fell in love with it. They did have to turn it off once we got to Deliverance, but whatever.
So my dad's like that as well. He's like, anything with harsh vocals, he just turns off. Although I did manage to get him into Nightwish.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, tiny. That's as evil as this have come.
tiny victories. I did get my dad to go to the Opeth concert with me when we went to see the Sorceress tour. And he loved it. So yeah, they both love the more acoustic side, and I think it really showcases Michael's like singing as well as his writing compositions, to be able to write such moving and beautiful, softer music is really difficult. And like one thing that I say over and over and over again is that inherently it's harder to write a faster song than it is to write a slower song, but it's much harder to write a good slower song than it is to write a good faster song. So I feel like this album kind of proves that point by showing it might be easier to write slower songs, but it's so much harder to write a good slow song.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I just really love Damnation. It's such a spooky vibe of an album. It's very cold. It's very like, I don't know, like I don't know, like just some sort of shriveled up like human being that's like been alive for 300 years, like giving you a cold hug. It's very weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I just really like it. It's just dark, but without the kind of almost the cheap option of sticking in distorted guitars and sticking in the harsh vocals. It's just so spooky. Yeah, and I love a lot of these individual tracks. Window Pane might be my least favorite, which is so weird because that's the one that's on the Roundhouse tapes. But I love In My Time of Need and Death Whispered a Lullaby, which I believe Steven Wilson actually wrote. I think he wrote Death Whispered a Lullaby. But my favorite track off of here is Closure. And I love when they play it live. I think it's the most upbeat track off of this album. And it does kind of shine a bright light. And I love that harsh stop. The only big criticism that I have is that I do feel as though this album has 2 closing tracks, and I feel like they should have chosen one and put the other one on Deliverance as the closing track from that one. So either put Weakness... That would have been such a good idea.
It would have been so much better. So had they taken out that final track from Deliverance and put like Weakness as that closing track, and then had this one end with ending credits, or vice versa, I think it would have been a brilliant way to end that album, rather than having Damnation end with these 2 ending tracks.
Yeah, no, it does drag out a little bit.
And it's like neither of these tracks are bad. It just feels like closing credit, or the ending credits just feels like a final track. And then I'm like, oh, there's more music. That's weird. It's more than just a post-credit scene. It's like a full, 4-minute thing. This is okay, sure. It just feels off. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I mean, with all that in mind, I feel like they're not that different. And I feel like maybe I would settle as them maybe both being B, or maybe, I don't know. Yeah. I feel they're somewhere in the middle. They're not, they don't wow me, but there's like some really good moments.
Yeah.
That are worth shouting about.
I think I would feel okay with putting both of these albums in B, and the only reason why I say that is when I look at the 2 albums that we have in the A and the B category, I don't think that this is quite as good as Still Life, but I feel like both of these have that same kind of spooky vibes that My Arms Your Hearse exhibits. So when I'm just looking at the vibes only, I feel like the vibes of these 2 albums match more with My Arms Your Hearse rather than Still Life. And that's the only way I'm trying to justify where to put these 2 albums. Yeah. They're both great albums, and if I was just to say overall, and I guess this would go more towards the point, if we were just comparing this to music in general, these would be A albums, but because we are comparing these to Opeth albums, they're B albums.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's interesting as we've got people saying Deliverance is better, Damnation is the best album.
Oh, it's so interesting,
Damnation
and this is why I love hearing some of these. Yeah, and I know a lot of people that think that Damnation or Deliverance is their favorite album, and I can I can totally see that. But yeah, that's just kind of where I'm sitting with these guys.
Yeah. All right. There we go.
Amazing.
Conclusion.
So yeah, from there we can go on to. I'm going to start running out of space here. Ghost Rever, and I always trip over how I say this. Ghost Reveries. I think I got that.
Ghost Reveries.
Ghost Reveries. Yeah, and so
Ghost Reveries.
so this is my copy. It's got a bonus disc on it.
Oh, I see. Mr. Fancy Pants.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so it's got the DVD version of the album and the documentary.
Okay.
With the director's cut video of the Grand Conjuration. So, yeah, I mean, full disclosure, this is one of my favorite albums from the group. This one I love. Ghost of Perdition is one of my favorite tracks from them, and I think it opens up this album beautifully, very much like Blackwater Park did, where it's just like it hits you right in the face. I love the composition. I love the flow of the album. I remember when I was really getting into this, I was finishing up my master's degree, and I just needed something that was both harsh and mellow, and this album gave that to me. So, yeah, and this has some of my absolute favorite tracks from them. Ghost of Perdition I already mentioned, but the Grand Conjuration, I love that guitar riff off of this, and I loved it to such an extent that it was a track from Symphony X from their Mythological Suite, where it ends with that same. It ends on the same note sequence that the Grand Conjuration has, but it doesn't finish it. So instead of it being the dun 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 dun, the ending is dun dun, and it's missing that last little bit. So I spliced the two together so that the final note transitions directly into the Grand Conjuration, and then it plays out. Because I'm a major nerd like that. But yeah, this is like probably my second favorite album from them, so I absolutely love this album. It's a top tier for me, but I'm interested to hear your take on this one.
So, I think Ghost of Perdition and the Baying of the Hounds are like insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so good.
Yeah.
I love those songs so much. Like, they're just ridiculous. Harlequin Forest, again, great, really cool.
I love the introduction.
I love everything that's happening in that song.
Yeah.
The Grand Conjuration, I find a bit boring.
I mean, you're not... I understand, because it is very repetitive.
And yeah, it's that whole repetitive riff thing. It's like, it must be like 5 minutes or something. The one, like... And it's kind of cool. And like, in a live context, it's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But in a studio context, I'm kind of like... They probably could have cut that section in half, and it would have had the same impact.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't be falling asleep, which is maybe a bit dramatic. But it's a shame, because that one song, like, drags the album down for me.
Oh, it's so interesting.
I'm on this song again, the one that just, like, keeps going and going. And, like, I have, on occasion, you know, as much as I love listening to full albums, dropped out halfway through, but like, right, what are we going to do next?
Oh man, see, and for me it's almost the opposite. Like that album, or that track, ties the whole album together in like a very tidy bow because of how much I love it.
It does.
So
yeah,
it's just an interesting. I love when opinions differ. Like, but I also feel like I also love Isolation Years, the actual ending of this album.
Yeah, no, that's good.
It's such a beautiful, and part of the documentary on this album was like, this was originally supposed to be a concept album all about like haunting and ghosts within like a family and all that kind of stuff. So there are certain songs that were written with this in mind, but then when they wrote Isolation Years, they're like, well, this doesn't match that concept, but we still love this too much to depart with it, so we'll just continue this idea, and we'll make a couple more songs and put out the album with not really having a concept on it, but having like a few tracks that have that essence, which I think was why Watershed really leaned into that idea. But it really goes to show how great a track is when it comes and messes up your whole concept album. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I'm looking at my notes as well, and I've realised Hulk and Forest also has that like extended outro where they're just like doing like just ages at the end. I was like,
Yeah.
did I? It bothers me. It bothers me. But I don't hate it. Like, that's the problem. The first two tracks, like, maybe the best two tracks Opeth's ever written. Like, so insanely good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just, again,
so I'm like,
yeah, I love...
It's just a bit of a sloped album for me.
Oh, that's fair. And I also love their more mellow tracks. I believe it's Atonement and I want to say it's Hounds of the... there's the two kind of like more mellow tracks, kind of in the middle, that I still love, but I can understand if people aren't really on board for that. So this will be interesting because for me, this is top tier S category. I know this is one of those, like, I don't want to unsully it, but there are 3 albums for me that are S, and this is the second. This is top tier S for me. Yeah.
This is somewhere between B and A for me, and because those first 2 tracks, they really carry it. They're pushing it up. They push it up into A because I love those songs so much. I mean, I could definitely push to A, maybe S. Like, there are some fantastic moments on it, and if I get over myself, if I think, okay, it doesn't actually matter that they play the same thing over and over again, they develop it a little bit.
Well, I don't mind. I don't mind putting this in A because I do recognize my bias towards this album. So it's one of those, like, if I sit down, I enjoy this album far more than I enjoy Blackwater Park. But I will also recognize that Blackwater Park is probably a better album in that sense, like a better critical album. Whereas for me, it's like emotionally, yeah, I love Ghost Reveries more. But I don't mind putting it in the A category, even though it's one of my favorites. So,
right. Yeah. Well, it's a team effort. We'll go with that then.
Exactly. So we can move on then to my first album from them, and quite literally a watershed. Watershed.
Yes. This is a little new to me, and also a little old. Because I think I said before, this was one of the 3 albums I was less familiar with. And I realised I listened to it years ago, and I was like, oh my god, this album is insane, it's so good, like, I have to come back to it. And then I never did.
Right.
And it was because it was so close to Blackwater Park and what that album was giving me. I was like, this is great. And I'm so glad I finally gone back to it, because I think I just had in my mind that Watershed was the first jazz Peth or new Peth or whatever, like the first of the new phase,
right,
and not Heritage. I just had that in my head for a while, but Watershed was the one where they were still like not really sure what they were doing and figuring out their sound. Just completely wrong,
right?
Fundamentally, just I was incorrect about all of that. It's great. I really, really love it. I'm loving the sort of more orchestral stuff. I've written down that it sounds like they've used Novo in there, so you kind of a little bit of what's to come with some of their later stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously, far more recently they've included like little bits of clarinets and more strings and all sorts of things to build up their tracks. So that was cool to see in there. And it doesn't suffer as well with the like overuse of the same riffs. Like, there is plenty of variety in it. It does build a lot, and even though I'm less familiar with it, it's already like, this is great. Like, I really love it.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with everything. This was the first album from them that I had heard, and what really kind of tipped the scales for me for this album, like, I love how it opens up, and I actually took, again, this was me being a massive nerd, I took Heir Apparent and I put it into Audacity, and I cut out all of the harsh vocal moments and just made it an instrumental piece by making it flow from one section to the other. And I would listen to just that over and over and over again because I loved all the instrumentals, but at that point I couldn't deal with all those harsh growls. So yeah, it took me like, I spent a full night chopping up this track and moving the sections so that it would flow from one movement to the other. And even now, sitting down and listening to it in its entirety is a little off-putting because of all these like harsher moments that I had like left on the cutting room floor. But now I love the entire thing. What really did it for me was Burden and Hessian Peel. Those two tracks, I hadn't heard anything like that before. I love the throwback that Burden had to like some of the more powerhouse ballads that like Guns N' Roses would do, that Ozzy Osbourne or Black Sabbath would do, like some of those like early, like even like Deep Purple and Uriah Heep, like some of those like acid rock bands would have these slower melodic movements but still have this massive powerhouse leading it. So yeah, I thoroughly love this album. And I come back to it, when I actually sit down and try to rate it, that's where I get a little tripped. Because it's not quite, like, it's touching greatness with Burden, Hessian Peel, and Heir Apparent, but there are a few points on, like, the Lotus Eater and Porcelain Heart that I'm not as big of a fan of. Like, they're still great music, but that's where I'm just like, okay, guys, let's wrap it up. So that those like 2 or 3 tracks, I'm like, it does weigh the album down just a hair for me.
That's fair. Yeah. And I'm still quite new to it in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. At least compared to some of the other Opeth albums that I've really digested. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe at the moment I'm like, it's kind of similar to Blackwater Park in sort of the compositional approach. Is it as good? Maybe. Maybe I've got a lot of emotional bias because I've listened to Blackwater Park a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely hovering around the A tier for me. I do really like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have no problem putting this in the A tier. Just like, even with my bias of it being my first album from them and really, really loving the music that's on it, it's, as I mentioned, it's touching greatness, but it's not quite in that same tier. So yeah, it's the A for me. And then we can go to the true Watershed, the one that changed everything. I'm going to put it down here just to make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, what did you... Now, I have the special edition, but it's up at the cottage because this is one of the versions that my dad can listen to.
A bit of plastic just fell out of this one.
Oh, no!
So.
Yeah. Mine has like a little holographic image on it where the head actually falls from the tree when you move it.
No. Yeah, no.
Yeah, mine, it's similar to like the packaging of this guy, but it's got like the holographic item on this. I remember when this album first came out, and I was... Oh, no. Sorry, I just...
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I remember when this album first came out, and I was torn on it, because there were moments that I really enjoyed, but there were also a lot of, like, what is going on? And I remember playing this for a guitar friend of mine who, like... He's the kind of person that goes head first into no matter what he's doing, and that becomes his life for, like, 5 years. So he went into playing the guitar and did that for 5 years. And he put out, like, 2 albums, and they're both brilliant, and I love them. And for him, he loved this album. He's like, this is, like, God tier. He can't believe some of the sounds that were going on to this. And for me, I'm like, yeah, but they're just playing the same riff over and over and over and over again. So I'm not a big fan of that. So yeah, for me, this is one of my... I hate to say it, but it's one of my least favorite albums from them. I think there's a lot of experimentation because they have. This was that first. I love your take on the jazz path, because I think that's perfect.
Yeah, it's just jazz with extra steps a lot of it.
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't feel it, because it just feels like it's the same few riffs that are just played over and over and over again. And I'm like, okay, I get the riff. What else can we do? But that being,
And yet you love Deliverance.
and yet I love Deliverance, and I don't know why. Like I think because
And you love Ghost Reveries.
I know. It's so weird. It's so weird to me that like the riffs on this one just don't do anything for me. Yet the riffs on Deliverance and Ghost Reveries I love. I think for one thing, I do not like Slither. And I know a lot of people love that track, because I believe.
What's other?
I know a lot of people love that track, and I think it was like written in honor of Dio, because it is very much.
Okay.
But like outside of Folklore and Famine, like those are my two favorite tracks off of this album. I am not feeling this album. I gotta be honest, I'm just not feeling it. But I'd love to hear your take on this album, because I have a feeling we might have differing opinions.
I think so, yeah. I quite like Heritage.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's what Sorceress could have been if Sorceress was like a bit more balanced and a bit more thought through. Like, there's lots of really good moments. I really like Slither. But it kind of does suffer from the same thing that Sorceress did, where the more the album goes on, the more it just kind of tapers off and kind of fades out into nothing. You're not really left with, and you're looking at past albums where you've got those like little 1 or 2 minute outro tracks.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a couple of outro-y kind of sounding things when you get to the end. Like Folklore's pretty tame. Not much really happens
right
until the end.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, Folklore is just a build-up for that end. And I remember when this first came out, somebody had uploaded the ending piece on YouTube with Clint Eastwood from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, with Michael's face over top of it, being like, it's just a Western. And I'm like, yeah, but I kind of love that. Yeah.
It's good. It's fun. It's not their best.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, changing sounds. I think changing guitarists as well.
Yes, because oh shoot, I can never remember his name, but
you say it was like a Frederick.
Frederick, yes, Frederick Atkinson joined the group.
Yeah.
After.
He ruined Opeth now.
Yeah, I know. And
yeah, so yeah, Peter left, Frederick joined.
Yes, Peter left, and you can actually feel that difference. That powerhouse secondary guitarist is kind of gone, and this more jazzy, playful style has been brought in.
Yeah. That's cool. I don't know. I like it. I don't dislike it. I think I'm maybe around a B. I could be pulled down to a C.
Yeah, for me, this would be one of the only D tier albums, and I know I'm so sorry. When I sit down and listen to it, I get enjoyment out of it, but there's always this voice in the back of my head that's like, okay, let's get to the point, kind of an idea. But I don't mind putting this into a C, because I would agree that I probably get just as much enjoyment out of it as I do Morningrise and Orchid. So
yeah,
that's fair. I feel okay with it being in C. I feel okay with it.
Yeah.
So then we come into Pale Communion, and I'm running out of space, so I'm just going to put it right smack dab in the middle. When I said that there were 3 albums that deserve to be in the S tier, this is one of them. This is the last one. This one is still my favorite Opeth album. Every single time I listen to it from front to back, I love every single moment of it. It's their proggiest effort in terms of like pure prog without leaning on the metal side of it. And every single time I listen to it, and I think I mentioned this this was like one of my first reviews too. I think this was like this one, Road of Bones, and like Flying Colors' second album were like my first 3 reviews. Each time I listen to this album, I keep thinking that the current song that I'm listening to is my favorite track off of the album. But then when we get to the next track, I'm like, oh no, this one's my favorite track. Oh no, this one's my favorite track. So like, yeah, for me, this is a perfect album. It's a 10 out of 10. It's total S tier category. But that's just me. So, what have you got for this one?
I think this is more of an E tip. No, I love it.
I was like, done. This stream is done.
I really, really love it.
Okay.
And I would agree. I think it is my favorite of the new jazz Peth era. The jazzy sounds. I really love it. There's so much going on. There's the sort of the subtler heaviness, but not too heavy. And that kind of, a lot of that comes from the organ for me, where it's just a little bit gained, a little bit driven, instead of the guitars. And it's just so good. Yeah. And this is, I think, the second album I listened to by Opeth. So I went from Blackwater Park to this, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Such a, like, that, the style change would give you whiplash. Like, that's just insane. Going from one style to another.
Speaking of weird intros, the first Dream Theater album I ever listened to was The Astonishing. And then I gave up on them for a year. So,
of course. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I heard Dance of Eternity, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, someone sent me the YouTube video and playing it live, and I was like, wow, like, this is amazing. I'll get the latest album.
No. No, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Boy. I've gone back. I'll fix that sin.
I mean, I will say, this isn't an Astonishing or a Dream Theater tier list, but I mean, the Astonishing has good moments on it. You just have to shift through so much to get to them.
I don't dislike it. I think it's definitely got too much of a bad rep.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it really deserves all the bad rep that it gets, but yeah, it's not one of their best albums, and I would feel, if that was your introduction to Dream Theater, oh man. Anyway, back to Pale Communion.
I love it. I love this album. It's really good, and I think there's just, I don't think we.
We'll just wait for the internet connection to stabilize. Just gonna make sure that everything is still good. Sorry, guys. Hopefully Grace comes back soon. Gonna make sure everything is still good. Still live streaming, so that's good. So just hoping that Grace comes back soon. Oh no. Okay, we will wait for the connection to reestablish, and hope that it does so soon as we continue to gush about Pale Communion. You can hear the rain in the background, so we'll just keep hanging out. I know, I'm so sorry, guys. Grace under pressure. I agree. So we will hope that Grace comes back soon. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Okay. So, if you want to... Oh, there we go. Oh, I'm seeing a new connection.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go.
And we're back. Gotta love technology.
Oh, my favorite.
But I think we're both in agreement that Pale Communion needs to be straight up into the S category.
Yeah, absolutely.
There wouldn't be.
That's what I was trying to say before everything frozen.
Yeah. I was afraid that for a moment the internet went out, because I'm very concerned about that. I know that sometimes when it starts raining, the internet will just cut out.
Yeah, I thought it was you. I was like, oh yeah, because you said that before. You were like, it's stormy season, like.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm like, okay, is the stream still good? Okay, the stream's still up. That's fine. I'm moving around. That's all good. Okay, so, but we only have 2 albums left.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, so
Sorceress.
the first one
Yeah.
being Sorceress, the one that we both were able to see from different ends of the world.
Yes.
Because I got to
I have
see.
got the bonus disc for this one.
Oh, yeah,
Did
I just have the record version of this one.
ah yes.
Or
Yeah.
did I? I think I might have originally had this album because I do remember listening to the bonus disc, and this was one of the few albums that I actually enjoy the bonus disc more than the actual album proper.
A lot of people say that.
Yeah,
I find that really interesting.
yeah, this album. Uh, I'm trying to think of a polite way to say this album is a mess without saying this album is a mess. um,
It's a bit of a mess, yeah.
it's a mixed grab bag. There are moments on this album that I love. Like I love the kind of the interlude of Persephone that opens it up, and I do love Sorceress. Um, I love Strange Brew, and I love the he calls it, what does he call it? Cock rock of Era. Um, that and I love that. Like it kind of has that same essence that that the Grand Conjuration has, where it's got that meaty guitar riff. But a lot of the tracks in the middle of it, like Will the Wisps, the Seventh Sojourn, A Fleeting Glance, I'm like, because I re-listened to this album this past week in preparation for this, and I'm like, I don't even recognize half of these tracks. And I remember diving in and devouring this album when it first came out to review it, and I don't think I've touched it since. Like maybe once or twice since then, maybe in preparation for the concert. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, weirdly, I've listened to this album a lot. I don't know why.
mm-hmm.
I think it is a nice kind of chill Opeth, and it doesn't hit as hard. It's not as aggressive. You know, there's a lot more laid back moments, and it's not as. It feels like you don't have to take it as seriously, and you can kind of just like lean back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm the same. Like I love Sorceress. Like that as a track is great. Like the opening riff is great. Like the little synth patch and just like
Yeah.
everything that happened.
I
That
know.
was really cool.
I know a lot of people meme that first little organ work, like that. I know a lot of people meme that, but I love once it gets into the song proper, and it's just that like it's really hard and
Great.
heavy. So I love how a lot of these songs bring you on a pretty big journey, like kind of mirroring the style of more of the styles of the past with like Blackwater Park and Ghost Reveries, where like there's no real big hard and fast structure for these tracks. They're just going, but more in this jazzy, more proggy, more like acid rock expressions.
Yeah, it's a little bit random.
Yeah, random's a good word for it. It's very
Random.
yeah. There are so many moments on here that I'm like, okay, we're in some weird new territory, and we're still in the same song. All right, cool. Let's just keep going, man.
Yeah, and I like that, and I kind of respect that. You know, in some ways, you know, they're just trying to outprog themselves. I guess maybe.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
It's just
It's tough
yeah.
because I think I get more out of other albums than this one,
I agree.
but it's like I get different things out of them.
Yeah. So
I don't know. What are you thinking?
see, this is where I'm torn. Because I don't feel like it's definitely better than, in my mind, it's better than Heritage and them. I'm wavering between like I think it's a B album for me. I think it's a solid B, and that it still has a lot of fun moments on it, but it's not quite to the same level as anything that would be on an A. And those moments that I do really enjoy, like Strange Brew and Sorceress and Era, I think what is being presented is a B category of music. But if you were to make a strong case of it being in a C, I couldn't argue against it.
I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Because I have listened to it quite a lot. It's interesting I'm seeing... Oh my god, someone saying Justice is Sorceress.
I mean, I understand those who like it, and I will admit, when I sit down and listen to this album, I thoroughly enjoy the process. But then once I stop listening to it, I'm like, all the songs are gone.
Yeah, it's not hugely memorable.
Yeah.
Other than that first, like,
it's very quirky and very fun, yeah.
Yeah, you just kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
Because
I think there is some good stuff in there, but it's not hugely memorable.
Yeah. And then we come to the final one, the most recent album. I do want to ask, how do you listen to this album? Because it is both in English and in Swedish.
So, usually I light a candle, get in the bath, have a nice chocolate croissant on the side, maybe a glass of champagne,
yep.
And I will put on the Swedish version. And I have listened to the English version a couple of times, and I'm just kind of like, you read about, oh my god, I've just been looking at the back, that's horrifying, what is that?
It's like a chimera.
It's like a spider with like 8 heads, but also there's like a scorpion's tail.
I was going to say, I think it's a scorpion with like, it's terrifying. Because that's on, I own this, when I listen to this album, I stream it.
I hate that.
It's not good. I stream this album and I listen to it mainly in Swedish. And I'm kicking myself because when I pre-ordered this album, I ordered it in English. And much like you, when I do listen to it when I'm at home, I listen to the record version, and I'm debating if I even want to go out and buy the Swedish version because I do enjoy the Swedish version more.
See, I ended up with the old double disc, so I got the choice. And I was originally leaning towards the English version, but then you start reading about the album and how they wrote it and everything, and it's kind of like, well, they wrote it with Swedish lyrics in mind, like they wrote it in Swedish, and they kind of shoehorned the English lyrics in afterwards.
Yeah, because it's
a kind of like, please don't leave us, like, men over 50 that don't care about anything, like, other than English, like, stick with us. Here's like a truce offering. Here's an English version if you really want that. But they wrote it in Swedish, so I kind of always lean to that one. And it is weird because sometimes I'll find myself like listening to it and trying to sing along, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, what's happening? And I'm like, I don't know what my mouth is doing. It's really surreal. But it's in terms of the music side of things, it's good. I really liked it. Yeah. It was definitely a positive direction.
Oh yeah.
Fred Sorceress. I think that's a good ending.
Yep.
It's hard again to say which bits were memorable, but then when I'm always looking at the track list, I'm looking at them in Swedish.
Yeah.
So the words for the tracks are already like not going into my brain because I have no idea what they say. So that doesn't help.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of good moments on it. I do like it.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree. This, for me, is a perfect comfort listen, because there's no one track that really stands out. It's the whole album that I just love. I love the journey of this whole thing. I think this is a massive step up from Sorceress. And yeah, I think that it flows so much better in Swedish. And it does feel like the English is shoehorned, and they're trying to make the cadence of what they had essentially said in Swedish work in English. Yeah, this is one of my favorite albums from them, and it's probably one that I've listened to the most, even though it's the most recent one. Because, as I mentioned, it's such a comfort album for me. And
yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so for me, this is an A tier.
I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think this is.
It doesn't. quite have the magic of Pale Communion for me.
I agree.
But I think maybe part of that is just because I've known Pale Communion for longer.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't actually manage to see Opeth on this tour, to see them play any of it live, so
yeah,
the songs didn't kind of cement themselves in my brain that way. Because I always find when I see a band play an album or bits of an album live, that suddenly like transfixes those songs into my mind,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And everything starts to stand out and be a bit clearer.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it's like the whole thing. It flows really well. It's really blended.
Mm-hmm.
The different tracks. You don't really know where you are in the album. You're just kind of going through it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of good. You can get kind of just lost in it,
mm-hmm.
which I like.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it would be so weird to listen to any of these tracks outside of the album. So if they were to play it live, I don't think they would ever play an album in its entirety, just with the amount of back catalog that they have to play whenever they do a live show. But but I really hope, like, if they do tour this album, and I hope that they would play it in its entirety, because that's the only way for me to actually enjoy most of these tracks. But then you take so much real estate out of their set list for all the other tracks that they have to try to get into.
Yeah, it's a little bit mental. I mean, I'm sure that recently must have been 2020 or something. They did like an online poll, like which songs should we play
mm-hmm.
on our upcoming tour. We'll do one song for every album.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, which song was it? Everyone was trying to vote for the really long song. Yeah, the Black Rose Immortal from Morningrise. That would just take up like
take up so much of the set list. Yeah. I know that's part of the reason why, because I've been pleading that Genesis would play Supper's Ready in their last Domino tour, but like they would never, because of and I know I was mentioning this on Twitter, but like it's the fan favorite. Like when they reached out to Twitter and they're like, "Hey, which song would you like us to finish their set list off with?" Like the number one track was Supper's Ready. And it's like there's no way, right? Like I know Steven Wilson will do it, but I
think more than anything for that ilk of Genesis, I've not got tickets to go and see them. It was kind of tempting, but it was also really expensive.
I agree. I just can't do it.
I'm not hugely into that era of Genesis anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But if they had done like Duke, like the suite of Duke, as if it was like originally meant to be played, because they did it once on tour in like 1980, and then never again, and there's like really really awful bootleg recordings of it. I would pay a lot of money to see that.
I 100% agree. In fact, I have the DVD of that show that they played it on because I loved it so much. A lot of the music is from And Then There Were Three, because like I think that it's a major underrated album, but like right in the center of that set, they're like, "Hey, we put out a new album called Duke, and we're just going to play it as like one track. So here you go." And I'm just like, so good. But yeah, if they had done that, I would have spent the like $200 to $300 that they're charging Canadian.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's so stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I was able to see them back in 2007. When they were doing their Turn It On Again tour. But I was just like...
I mean, Phil, you look at the videos coming out, I think, from the show a couple nights ago, and Phil's just like in an armchair, like, just like... vibing around, and it's just like...
It
reminds me of when I saw Yes in 2019, and Alan White is still technically part of the band and like touring drummer, and I think he's playing on the Quest, but they had like basically for him to get up to the drum kit on stage, like a banister thing to hold on, like pull himself up, and I'm just like, mate, like come on,
call it, just call it, my dude. Like, it hurts. Yeah, I remember the last time I saw Yes, and it was when this might have been back in like 2017 or something like that. This was when they were doing like full albums live. So it was the Going for the One, the Yes album, and Close to the Edge. Like, they would play those 3 albums consecutively from start to finish. So they started with Close to the Edge, went into the Yes album, and then finished it off for Going for the One. And I was both in awe in how much I love those albums, but they couldn't keep up with the energy that they were putting down from the studio albums, and it was hard, like heartbreaking. I was watching them, I'm like, my dudes, no. Just leave it to tribute bands, leave it to, other people. Just please just pack it in.
Oh dear.
It hurt. It really hurt. And after that, I'm like, I will never see these guys again. I just cannot. And now that Chris is gone, I just can't. So
I've got tickets to see them play Tales of Topographic Oceans next year. Oh no, it might be all of Relayer.
It might have been all of... Yeah, I think it's Relayer that they're doing now, because they did...
They did that last time, yeah.
Yeah, they did Topographic Oceans, and they did Drama, which...
Yes.
I was
like... Drama tour.
Yeah, like... Ugh.
Fun.
I think they could still manage the energy of Topographic Oceans, because it's a very mellow album, but they also... they never do that second track, which always makes me very sad, because that's my favorite. They always do Revealing Silence of Gods and Ritual, and that's it. And I think from that tour they did the acoustic set that was Giants Under the Sea, I think it's called. It's the third track.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and then they did a lot from Drama. But we're getting like really off topic here.
Just a tiny bit,
Just a little tiny bit. Just a little tiny bit. I think we can...
Slither? Oh, is it?
Yeah. I think we can wrap it up here, because we're at an hour and a half of this jaunty. But here's our final tiers of all the albums. I feel pretty good about it. And I've got my 4 albums beside me, and this is one of the few bands where I have all of their albums in record. So I feel, kind of proud about that.
I'm still missing one. I tried to order Orchid, on CD, but I tried to order Orchid, and then the person cancelled the order, and I was like, okay. On 12 out of 13.
Yeah. I was able to cheat the system and get the Candlelight era box set 3-disc that had Orchid, Morningrise, and My Arms Your Hearse. That, and I just love the cover of it. It's pretty beautiful. But yeah, thanks for coming on and chatting Opeth.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to promote? I will remind everybody to go and pick up Grace's EP. It's brilliant. I love it. I love the concept of it. I have an existential crisis once every 2 or 3 years about my impending mortality. So this gives a great music to that feeling. So yeah.
Yeah. That's what I've been working on. And then I've been booked to play my first live show.
Ooh.
Kind of. It's a live streamed show. So I'm playing the Prog Spaces Festival in November, which is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some stuff planned for that. We're going to do a little live studio session. I'm putting together some local musicians from a couple of other places, which is going to be cool. And very weird, because I've done a lot of live music before. Growing up I did a lot of orchestral stuff. Mm-hmm. But this is the first time I'm playing my music and someone has gone, "Hey Grace, can you play your music please?" And not me being like, "I'm going to play music now, you have to deal with it." Right. So yeah, that's exciting. And yeah, just general vibes, I guess.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And I've left your YouTube channel in the description, as well as your Bandcamp, so go and check those out. And yeah, just thanks for everybody for checking this out. Hoping to do more of these live streams soon. And yeah, I think that's about it. Any last words?
Listen to Opeth if you haven't already. And if you've sat through this, you kind of hope that you maybe had at least one album, but listen to all of them. They're all very good, even the C tier ones.
Yeah, even the C tier ones. The C tiers. That's right. I think that's a great place. Thanks everybody for coming out, and we'll catch you on the next one.